It's Monday, so that means J Leman joins us on the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's Jeremy Warner with our All-American linebacker to discuss a 50-49 victory for Illinois, almost 100 points, more than 1,000 yards, almost 1,100 yards, I believe, total in this game. Another overtime winner for Illinois, 4-0 under Brett Bielema in overtime. Jay, this looked like the game we kind of thought it would be at halftime. Illinois gets to 27-3 early in the third quarter. Feels like they're going to run away with this, and then Purdue with 14 points in about 30 seconds. And all bets were off after that. So I'll just open up to you. What did you make of that thing?
I saw that game. That was probably the top 5 most memorable game that I've seen at Memorial Stadium for all kinds of reasons. Some of those including losses. 30 years ago, the Penn State game, we were up by 21 and then it getting beat 35-31 by the number 2 team in the country. Remember that game and think that's one of the more memorable games. So I just think about all that stuff. But I think I'll start out by saying we're 5-1. Let's just say that. Okay, you're halfway through the season. You have reached the same win total as last year. So I would say, hey, it's a successful football season thus far. As Brett says, I think we got a good football team and knocking on some bigger things. That's a game we've seen us lose 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 times. You could just feel the momentum. We just could not get a stop. I have not seen the defense look like that where you just could not get a stop. But I will also give credit to Luke Altmyer. We've said all the time, and Barry Lunny, when you have a quarterback, you have a chance. I mean, I think they had 46 seconds left. The one thing you'd say is that they scored too fast, and Devin Maccabee on the wheel route to take the lead and then the 2-point conversion, and they scored too fast. And you have Luke make 2 huge completions on that drive. One to Pat Bryant, who is just a stone cold stunner when it comes to clutch moments, and then Hank Beatty, who actually made some big plays down the stretch, really key. And so at the end of the day, you won the game. Tons of stuff to break down on that. But, man, it came down to who was going to make a play when you needed to, and I feel like Illinois at the most critical time did.
We will get into the minuscule details of this game, of course, Jay. But zooming out, I just kept thinking about how the margins in these games are so small in the Brett Bielema era. And I just went back. I think Brett is 10-10 in one-score games at Illinois, 3-0 this season now, which is a big reason they're having a successful season compared to last year when they lost a bunch of them. But in 30 Big Ten games in Illinois, Brett Bielema, he's now 14-16. He has a +10 scoring differential, right? So you just think of how little things swayed this game. I think the Luke Altmyer fumble on that final drive that could have ended the game. I think of just little things throughout that game that turn it. And it's amazing. Like if Matt Bailey or Dylan Rosiak are able to get that interception, they probably win by 2 scores.
I think you're exactly right. So there's Rosiaks, there's Bailey's, can you get Ryan Brown on the ground one time, right? Can you do that? Can you actually kick the ball when you're going for a fourth and it's a 2-point conversion for 18 yards? I was screaming, kick the ball. Instead of trying to go for 2, I get what the chart says, but just take the point. That ended up being a very, very big point, right? And so there's also moments in the game, like I believe in the first half there was a 3rd and 20 that we completed to Zachary Franklin to get a touchdown, right? Mm-hmm. So there's things that go back and forth. I think there was a lot of things we kept them in the game through the chunk plays, through the turnovers, and then I would say this. Purdue, as far as talent-wise, is probably at an equal level to Illinois. I mean, there's some spots that maybe they're less or not, but they've recruited a similar style player, but they were not playing with confidence, right? And they're not playing well as a team together right now. And so that's where you had the 20-point spread. But you give a team like that confidence, the athletic ability is there. I mean, Kadrian Jenkins played a whale of a game for them at linebacker and at rush end, number 4. He was the best defensive player on the field for them, right? And so on the field altogether. And what I saw too is when you don't have a great defensive players erase other people's mistakes. Xavier Scott has been that for Illinois. He's been kind of making some game-saving tackles, some big plays. Obviously, it was a late scratch in that game. We don't have enough guys on the defensive side of the ball to close out a game the way you want to be closed. Whether it's a big D lineman, whether it's a linebacker making a play, whether that's a safety making a play or a cornerback, we just don't have a closer on that side of the ball that makes up for other people's mistakes.
Dylan Rosiak has been a closer in overtime. I'll give him that much.
He's the sack master on that. That was an interesting play. We can break that down in the film room for sure.
Yeah. All right. So what fell apart, Jay, in that second half for the defense? Obviously not able to stop Ryan Brown on the ground in that first half, but I think you would have dealt with that because it's eating clock. You're not getting a lot of chunk plays. But obviously Ryan Walters schemed up some offense. He was the offensive play caller in this one. They schemed up some plays that I thought were really good, but why did Illinois allow so many chunk plays when that had been their MO of just limiting explosives?
So it felt to me, so in the first half, they really didn't give Ryan Brown much of a chance. I mean, there wasn't much rhythm. I think he had 9 yards at halftime, I believe. And then it was like a totally different ball game once they got some confidence. They did a couple things. Number one, I do think Walters kind of saw what Illinois is doing, knows what Illinois does, and schemed up something for Illinois. Now, Illinois did mix up some coverages. We haven't seen a ton of cover 2. We haven't seen a ton of cover 3 at times. We've seen more man. And Brett kind of alluded to it, that we might not have been ready to run those coverages in a game, especially with Xavier Scott, who's kind of your swing man in there, being out. And then Ryan Walters alluded to, man, they did a lot of different things, and then we kind of adjusted from there. But I thought the eye discipline was absolutely horrible, especially on the tight ends, whether it's our strong safety with Matt Bailey or some of the linebackers on the backs and the tight end. They were delaying the tight end out or faking a block like by the tight end, and then he would just run free. It's like they got their eyes off the tight end. Max Clare, who's a good player, probably an all Big Ten player if he had a good quarterback, didn't have anybody even near him sometimes. We had Torrey Cox fall down against, I think, number 7, Edrin or somebody. So they took their shots at Caleb Patterson, but Caleb Patterson really battled, I thought, and got some PBUs. But I think the eye discipline, number one. I think number 2, they exposed some of our linebackers and strong safety and coverage. Those were some of the big ones that got exposed. Number 3, we couldn't get Ryan Brown on the ground. Like, we had pressures. There was a decent amount of pressure. Gabe had him dead to rights one time. Seth had him dead to rights one time. But he was stepping up and he was getting yardage. And then, the bane of Illinois fans is Devin Rockaby. He seems to play at a different level with us. He was a matchup nightmare on the pass coverage for the Illini. And he was slippery running the football. I mean, they ran the football well and they were able to do whatever they wanted and just had a ton of confidence. And I'll tell you what, that made Illinois look really bad. They have not tackled well the last 2 games either. Yeah. The tackling's been poor, and there was some mental errors, and then the eye discipline was off. You add all that in, really, really bad defense, probably the worst half of defense I've seen them play, well, of course, all year, but in a long time.
Felt like last year, in that second half last year. We know I thought Rosiak played pretty well. The second linebacker spot's a weakness for Illinois right now, Jay, but I expected more from the defensive front, right? Like, I know they did get pressure. You're right. Like, they pressured him. They just weren't able to corral him, but it's just, you need more plays from those guys. I hate to make it so simple. So what is the key to getting more, stops, turning pressures into sacks, or just finding a way to corral these guys?
I think it all starts on first down. It just seems we don't do great on first down, and people get ahead of the chains, and then we can't really let those guys just go and pass rush. So I think it starts with our run defense being more stout. I want to see more run stuffing stunts, moving guys. Dennis Briggs, not the biggest guy, but very athletic for an interior lineman. Gabe Akis, not the biggest guy, but athletic when he moves into the interior. Seth Coleman, very athletic. We just haven't had enough. It's hard to say it because it's not great hard-hitting analysis. We have not been staunch enough at the point of attack. That's just the point. We're getting collapsed at the point of attack. And it seems like people are getting 4, 5, 6 yards a carry on us, especially on first down. And it makes it tricky defensively to call plays in that regard. We also didn't have, and you mentioned it, I think Rosiak played better than he did at Penn State. But, there was a number of times, especially when they ran that inverted bone formation, we were not reading, we did not read a puller to save our life sometimes on the backside. We were not reading pulls clearly. We weren't filling holes like we needed to fill in that bone formation, inverted bone formation. They have the two tight ends in the backfield. And so some of that is a conflict of, if you're in man-to-man, the running back's going this way and the lineman's going this way, there can be a conflict because you want to read the lineman, but it could be a pass. You get that. So there were some conflicts that we were put in, but honestly, up front, we're not playing with enough force up front. We're not playing with extension. We're not being staunch at the point of attack. And I think that's the biggest weakness of this football team, because they're able to do whatever they want off the play action.
And Jay, it all sets up to what have been the identity of this team through the first, 3 weeks. They had 9 takeaways. They have 1 takeaway in the last 3 games. And I think that speaks to the ability of being able to run against Illinois, and defenses don't have to test them in kind of zone coverage and all of that. So what can Aaron Henry do here? What's the response to the counter here?
Well, you're exactly right. Like, I mean, you even hear Brett talk about you can't have an early down turnover throwing the football. It's because it's so hard to get a turnover on early downs. You get turnovers in the passing game on 3rd and long on stuff where you can dial up pressure and whatnot. So you got to have early success. I think we got to have Xavier Scott back. I know they said in the press conference he was out probably a couple of days. Let's hope that he's 100%. I think he's a real, no pun intended, X factor for this defense, because the way they move him around, and he's physical enough to tackle inside of the box, kind of that Quan Martin kind of approach. So I want to see that. I think also I want to see Matthew Bailey. I think he's better in the box than he is in coverage. I really do. I think that's his strength. I think I want to see him rolled up more. And I want to see somebody rise up other than Rosiak. It's kind of a 3-way battle. See, I saw Odeluga get in a little bit this last week, but it's been between Meade and James Kreutz. Not one of those guys has just taken the spot. Meade's probably gotten the lion's share of the reps. We've got to be more solid in that. So I think that was some of the change up in coverage, was maybe to try to alleviate and try to stop the run. They knew they were going to have a running quarterback. And listen, I don't really buy that when we found out on Friday that Ryan Brown was playing, and it was a totally different game plan. Come on, man. I don't buy that. Brett doesn't buy that. I usually buy what Brett's saying, but come on, you knew Ryan Brown had a chance to play, right?
And you knew what he was going to do. It was not a surprise what he was going to do.
So when they do the quarterback zone read and pull it the first 3 times for a combined 40 yards of rushing, I'm like, what is going on? Now, I will say, that is a pressure point on Xavier Scott, sometimes on his position, on the nickel position. I will say that does zone in on the linebackers as well, because a lot of times our ends are crashing down to take the dive play. So was it hitting our weakness? Yes. But to say that you didn't know that was going to happen, no. Everybody knew that was going to turn into that. I thought there was a chance that Ryan Brown might start anyway, with Hudson Card kind of having issues. So you had to be prepared for that at somehow, right? Was it a little different scheme? Yes. Did Ryan Brown start playing with confidence? Yes. Do I wish I had a better answer of how we can get better at stopping the run? Yes. I'm sure they're asking themselves too. Is it personnel? Is it scheme? Is it both? Is it coaching? So I think it's a conglomeration. They got to figure something out fast, because they got a rushing attack that's pretty good coming into town.
I know you guys have heard me talk about HomeField apparel a lot, but there's a reason. I have some of these shirts from HomeField apparel, and they are a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. And what I love about them is they're focused on creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. So go to homefieldapparel.com and check out their Illini gear. The Flying Illini t-shirt, I love. If they have any bomber jackets, go check those out. But you see all of these vintage designs that are great. They kind of stand out in a crowd, but also these are comfortable, well-fitting. They're not the boxy kind of ones you get at the random department store. No, these are well-fitted, comfortable t-shirts and apparel. So go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. Go to the drag down menu, click on Illini, and you'll see all of these great shirts, including Orange Crush, Old School Fighting Illini basketball shirts, the Flying Illini t-shirt with the great winged logo, Script Illini gear, including t-shirts, hoodies, an orange ringer tee, the 2004-05 Illinois basketball shirts so you can relive those glory days, but also they have great hoodies, great crew necks, great Illini football gear, including the 80s Illini helmet on there. If you're an old school sweatshirt guy, they got those. If you're a quarter zip guy, they got those. If you want a women's tank there with the script Illini. They got that. So go to HomeFieldApparel.com to check out all the great gear they have there. If you're not an Illini fan, they have more than 180 plus growing list of schools. So you can check out all the gear from all over the country. And right now, use code Illini24 for 15% off at HomeFieldApparel.com. That's Illini24 for 15% off all the gear at HomeFieldApparel.com. All right, Jay, the good thing is you got an offense that can bail out a bad defensive performance. You got a quarterback playing at a high level right now with Luke Altmyer. Barry Lunny, I thought, had a phenomenal first half, and then Luke Altmyer just, I thought, made huge plays. You mentioned the final drive of regulation. Sure. I don't know if we talk about that one enough because the throws he made, the plays he made there. But those two, that combination along with the receivers, Illinois got something special brewing there.
Yeah, what I think is really, really special is when was the last deep ball that you saw Luke Altmyer throw that didn't have a chance? Like Zakari dropped one he should have caught. Malik had a chance late in the game. He put it in the breadbasket for Bryant. Like he gives guys chances. The accuracy of Luke Altmyer is really, really good and kind of an underrated aspect. We know that his legs have played a big part. His legs played a big part as well. What I like what Barry Lunny did early in the game is he was able to get his guys in space against that man coverage, against that soft spot of the flat. We saw Colin Dixon have a big play in the flat. We saw Josh McRae score one in the flat. Zakari Franklin score one in the flat. Tanner Arkin, right? He does a great job of spreading the ball around and kind of schemes them up. And, for not having one of our best offensive players in Caden Fagan, was actually able to run the football. Now, it's not a great defense, but ran the football at a decent clip, better than we have in other Big Ten games for the most part. It wasn't great. Josh McRae played solid, but man, I was really impressed by Luke Altmyer. He's the guy, for not having great offensive line play or defensive line play. To be 5-1, you've got to be very, very happy. And Luke Altmyer is a big reason, and Pat Bryant is a big reason. I think if you don't have Pat Bryant, you might not win those. You don't win those three games: Kansas, Nebraska, and now Purdue, because he's made critical plays at critical times in each of those games.
Yeah, so this is a fun fan question for you. Best quarterback season since, and then best wide receiver season since?
You look at the numbers. I think Kurt Kittner in 2001 was like a 25-5 season, kind of a different era of college football. Those were remarkable numbers. So I would put it right now in that. Shieldhouse had great consistency over 4 years, but I don't think he ever had numbers like that. Juice had some explosive numbers, I believe, in 2008, where they were putting up some serious yardage. I go back to, Brandon Lloyd had a great year in 2001. AJ Jenkins had a great year in 2011, maybe.
Yeah. Jenkins had like 1,200 yards. Regis Ben obviously had some big seasons, especially 2008. And obviously Isaiah Williams was really good last year. But what Pat's doing is in that realm, right? And I think that's kind of the point. Is what Pat's doing is putting himself in one of those better receiver seasons. And I think Altmyer is kind of putting himself in that kind of Kittner territory so far.
I agree. One thing about Pat Bryant is this: he just plays angry, which is great. He's like, he has a defensive mentality and an offensive player. And, he's very hard to get down, number one. He competes on contested catches, and he's been exceptional in clutch situations. As Ron Zook used to tell us, if you think you're an A-plus player, I got to have you play like an A-plus player in big-time games at big-time moments. And that is what Pat Bryant has done. I think we got a ton of confidence. The poise that he has with 30 seconds to make a catch over his shoulder, to say, hey, I want this play to me or Zakari in the first play overtime, to say that, it just shows the confidence that he's playing with, and good things happen to him. Barry's tried to get him the ball in different ways, whether it's reverses or get him the ball in certain ways, because he's good things happen, as Luke says, right? When they get him the ball. So, but Luke, what I've been so impressed with Luke is he's really tough. I think that's an underrated aspect of Luke Altmyer. He's taken a lot of hits. I hate to look at the sack numbers for the Illinois offensive line the last 2 weeks, which haven't been good.
And the running backs.
You mean the running backs in protection, you're saying? Yeah. What wasn't great in protection at all. Khalil Valentine, I think he probably had an MA that missed assignment on that sack fumble. And so you get that with some freshman quarterbacks, freshman running backs. But, man, Luke has been so gutsy. Does he hold on to the ball every once in a while too long? Yes. Does he run the ball exceptionally well when we need him to run the ball? Yes. But is he accurate, and is he getting through his reads better? Yes. And so I like all that Luke. And here's the thing. You always feel like you're in the game with them. Like, it's not like, oh, they scored, we're done. We've been in the situation where we've been 2 touchdowns in a game where, like, there's no way we can come back because we don't have a quarterback to actually create the offense. So I'm so excited with Luke Altmyer. He's playing like a top 3 or 4 quarterback. I said he was a top 5 quarterback early in the year in the Big Ten. I still stand by that. But, man, and I heard you mention this too, Jeremy, is like you put some of the other weapons around him, maybe in Oregon or in Ohio State has, he could be putting up similar numbers other people. He's putting up great numbers. But I'll take Pat Bryant and Zakari almost any other duo over. I mean, Jeremiah Smith is special. I understand that. Some of these guys are special. But Pat Bryant is playing at a high level, and so is Zakari.
And I want to mention this, Jay. It's kind of a deepening wide receiver room that we're seeing. Colin Dixon starting to make plays, 2 catches, 69 yards. Hank Beatty, 3 catches, 53 yards. Malik Elsie.
Hank was making some big catches out there.
Yeah, Malik Elsie played 22 snaps in this game. That's more than he's played here recently. So that's encouraging for me to see that, one, those guys are playing more, but 2, like, they're producing. And Luke and Barry are willing to go to those guys, and they can make big plays. Hank had 2 huge plays in the fourth quarter.
Well, and we're seeing trust in times that it's critical, right? Malik Elsie had the last play of the game regulation to him, right? Hank Beatty had balls to him on that drive. Khalil Valentine's been in there in critical situations. You see pieces of depth growing. We also see that on the defensive line. I'll give a shout out to Alex Bray. Alex Bray on that last play in overtime did a tremendous job of getting a push that cleaned it out for Rosiak to make the play, right? You're seeing guys get in there, making plays and getting more depth. It's almost like you can see the pieces that Brett's making, and it's almost like, can we sustain success this year and then have that more organic kind of, we're growing guys. We're not just getting transfer portal guys. We're developing guys, kind of that Brett Bielema model at Wisconsin, Iowa, Kansas State model that we've tried to want to model to become. Are we getting there with the type of guys we're getting? You can kind of see glimpses of it, and it's exciting to see those young guys get some playing time.
Got to mention Josh McCray, stepped up big time, 129 yards from scrimmage, 3 touchdowns, career high for him. And they needed it, Jay, because Caden Fagan could be out for a while from the sounds of it with, getting consultations from doctors across the country for a leg injury. So we'll see if Brett Bielema has anything to say today. But that was kind of vintage Josh McCray. And after the first 2 games, I didn't know if that would return. I felt great for the kid. What did you see from him? What did he bring?
Number one, I give Barry Lunny, I don't know if he's listening to our podcast or not, but he had him out of the shotgun. Had him out of the shotgun and into the pistol. Yeah. So he was running from 7 yards deep. And there's such a difference when he gets the ball from that depth and hits it with speed, right? I think there's such a difference with Josh McCray. So there's a big difference in that. I love that they started running some of the counter plays with him, which are a gap scheme play. Like, hey, a puller, he's got a 7-yard head start, getting 3, 4, 5 yards a pop, got 15 yards a pop one time, which is great. What I don't people don't realize, though, is Josh McCray on the blocking side and on the pass catching side, he's been a real pleasant surprise catching the football this year. He's had some really great catches, Nebraska being one, but caught the ball probably a critical play on 3rd and 6 where Luke was kind of in his Mahomes bag, just kind of dumping stuff off, and McCray had the heads up to turn from blocking to throwing it, and it was a big mistake by Kadrian Jenkins in that play. As a linebacker, you never go off your man until the quarterback is past the line of scrimmage, and I know that he was hitting himself for that one, but I've been really impressed with Josh McCray. As Brett said, hey, he's went through a lot. You're going to need backups to step up, and he certainly stepped up in a big way. Wouldn't be surprised if he was the player of the game on the offensive side for them.
Injuries, though, like Xavier Scott, like that was a big injury. Caden Fagan being out, like, he's one of the most talented backs. Like, finally, the injury seems to be hitting Illinois, and that's a concern, right, in the second half of a team that doesn't have as much depth as.
Well, I'm concerned because those are 2 of our best players that can erase mistakes. When I always talk about you look at Caden Fagan's big run against Penn State. Penn State had that play dead to rights. The guy just missed a tackle. Caden made a guy miss, right? If you're in the Big Ten and running back, you got to make people miss every once in a while, right? If you're running back. So Caden Fagan really made that play. I'm not sure other running backs would have made that play at Penn State. So he erases mistakes. And so does Xavier Scott. And so we have some depth in those positions. More depth than, say, offensive or defensive lines. You're like, okay, well, if we're going to have an injury, maybe it's there if you have to have one. You don't want an injury for anybody. But what I was thinking is, with Caden Fagan out, it just felt like you have a little less explosion in that run game. And it's tangible. It's been tough for me to understand Aiden Lawfrey. Coaches are really high on him. They think that he's the most improved player coming out of camp. But it just seems we haven't been able to get him in the open field for some reason. I'm not sure why. Khalil Valentine has a little wiggle to him and can do some different things. But at the same time, he's not as good a receiver as McCray. He's young. He's not good as protection. McCray has the size of Fagan, but not the burst. And so Fagan kind of has a little mix of all those and was our best player. So I am concerned about that. I am happy that we're still able to win a Big Ten game without two of our best players. So I think that's a positive. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of the big plays, because we saw a ton of big plays defensively, right? That was the huge thing we hadn't given up. I was just telling you, when was the last time we saw a big play, pass down the field, guys wide open? I don't know how much that was due to scheme, how much was Xavier Scott being out, but it was a huge issue, the big plays.
Yeah. All right, Jay, here we go. Ranked versus ranked matchup, 100-year rededication for Illinois against Michigan. They've been planning to have this game for a long time now. You get it, and what a setup it is. Illinois at number 22, Michigan at number 24. And you feel like with Michigan, not the same as the defending champion version of itself, but boy, they're really talented, especially on defense. But let's start with the key for the offense. Going against the defense with several, top 50, top 60 draft picks, a couple guys who can go in the top 10, and Will Johnson and Mason Graham. What's the key for the offense against the Wolverines?
Yeah, great question. Mason Graham, I saw the last projection. He was projected number 2 pick overall at the defensive tackle position. Think just as good, if not better, than Johnny Newton. I mean, that's how disruptive this guy is. I believe it's Chris Jenkins. I don't know his first name. They had another big tackle as well. Will Johnson, probably the best corner we'll see all year. And so I projected top 10 pick as well.
Kenneth Grant's the other first round.
Grant. Jenkins was the guy last year. Grant is the guy. Yeah. Huge, 340 pounds. So they're really, really big up front. Wink Martindale, longtime defensive coordinator, really good corner, brought him from the Ravens and whatnot to replace Jesse Minter. Guys, this is a good defensive football team and going to be very, very physical at the point of attack. So what does Illinois have to do? I would love for them to, I know Barry Lunny will do this, use the pass to set up the run. They did that well against Nebraska, kind of wore out the bigger guys that Nebraska had. If you look at Luke Altmyer's completion percentage on some of these flat routes and some of these play actions, it's very high. I mean, you look at what they've been able to do, and they're easy throws, but there's guys always open, whether it's Colin Dixon in the flat, whether it is Tanner Arkin. It's kind of replaced what Isaiah Williams was in the slot. We've kind of had to be creative in that regard, and Barry Lundy's done a good job. I want to see more of that. I want to see the defense running east and west, take a shot vertical with Pat Bryant. I'll take Pat Bryant on Will Johnson. I really will. I'll take Pat Bryant against anybody right now.
That's a fun matchup.
It's a matchup. Those guys are really, really good football players. And you've also got Zakari, Zakari is a guy you cannot forget about. Zakari, because does a great job on contested catches. So I think we use the pass to set the run. I think you're going to see, to improve the run game, I want to see, with moderation, more quarterback run. Listen, we saw this happen when we had A.J. Bush and Reggie Corbin, okay? And Reggie Corbin had a huge year, partially because A.J. Bush could really run the football. This is like 6 or 7 years ago. So you've been with us since that long, man. Thanks a lot. But I would say it adds another dimension because you really have to account for it. I don't want it to be just a staple of what we do, because it's not, but I want it to be accounted for to see if that gives us the half a man advantage on some of our interior runs. I also want to see us continue to run to the exterior, to the outside, as I feel that's been our biggest success, as Arkin, J.C. Davis, and Melvin Priestley have had better first half of the season than our interior linemen. I also like the reverses, the jet sweeps, all of that stuff, anything to get us in space with our athletes.
I want to shout out the tight ends blocked really well in this game. Tanner Arkin had a couple catches against Purdue, and I did think J.C. Davis looked really good as a run blocker. All right, key for the defense against the Wolverines that have some quarterback issues, Jay, but we know they can run the football.
Well, the funny thing is that I think they were hoping to go to Jack Tuttle, but I'm not sure they're going to go to Jack Tuttle after this game. They might just keep Alex Orji in there and make it happen. Listen, Jack Tuttle's been around. I mean, he was at Utah. He was at Indiana, never played in Indiana, and we're at Michigan. Is he going to play? If he didn't play at Utah and Indiana, why is he playing at Michigan? So they definitely got some quarterback issues, right?
We've talked about this, Jay. How much would they give Luke Altmyer right now?
A lot, right? Then, I mean, they can pay for Luke Altmyer $3 million. I mean, David Portnoy Barstool said he's got $3 million in his bag for any quarterback that wants to come to Michigan, right? Now, here's the key is going to sound simple. It's stop the run. And as much as we say, you ever hear that phrase like football comes down to blocking and tackling? Basically, that means if you can block, you can run the ball. And if you can tackle, you can stop the run. They're going to get in big boy, barge, jumbo formations, and they're going to run the football. That's how they beat USC. They couldn't throw the ball in a 2-minute drill. They just had to run the ball down the field to beat USC. They're very one-dimensional. The one guy they have in the passing game that's really good is Colston Loveland. And I think that is where we've got to have Matthew Bailey and Xavier Scott play their best because Loveland is a matchup nightmare, probably a little bit better and more physical than Max Clare was at Purdue, but those are two really good tight ends. And so Loveland is a matchup nightmare. They don't have a tailback like Blake Corum. Donovan Edwards hasn't been as good. I believe Mullings has had some moments, but these are legitimate tailbacks. They're playing at Michigan, right? This offensive line totally revamped from last year, but they reloaded. This is a Joe Moore Award offensive line 2 of the last 3 years. But they remember, this is a team 2 years ago that was really good that should have been beat by Illinois at that game. There were some questionable calls. Xavier Scott pick play. J.J. McCarthy on the replay, his knees down with his hand on the ball, but for some reason it wasn't overturned. There was a lot of different things. They have confidence that they can go and play with this football team. So I like that it's a basically an even when it comes to the spread. I think -2 or to Michigan. But the key is stop the run. You stop the run, do that. And I would love to see the turnovers. I don't think we can stop the run consistently enough without a turnover or 2 or a play going our way.
All right, Jay, the next 2 games are really tough against Michigan. Then you head out to Oregon, which is now the number 2 team in the country after beating Ohio State, what was a thriller of a game. But then you got 4 games that I would just qualify as toss-ups. And as we've seen in the Big Ten, after that top 5, it feels like you can throw all these teams in a bag and figure out, pick a name out of the hat to see who wins this. So just how do you kind of look at the back half of the season? Joey and I were talking, and I was like, 3-3 would be great if you can find a way to get to 8 wins. Because it's the Big Ten that just feels like outside of maybe UCLA, Purdue, Maryland aren't very good, but outside of that, everyone seems pretty close outside of that top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you look at Michigan State, look at Minnesota, look at Rutgers, even Washington at sometimes, right? I mean, Washington beat Michigan, and Washington kind of gets boat raced by Iowa, right? So it's kind of like it can happen. And guys, here's the thing. You can say what you want about beating Purdue by 1. Vandy beat Alabama. Mississippi State, I think, lost by 10 to Georgia. It wasn't that close, but still. We saw Florida almost get beat. I mean, Florida almost beat, was it Tennessee? Mm-hmm. Almost beat Tennessee. So you see stuff happen all the time, right? I mean, you see upsets happen. Athletes on each side of the ball. And so anything can happen. You'd be really happy with 3-3. I think you're 8-4. That'd be a good football season, something you could really build on. And Illinois probably, we haven't had 8 wins since 2022, and we haven't had 8 wins since prior to that since 2007. So you got to feel good about it. You kind of are wondering, okay, Illinois had some good wins. Could this be a signature win? Could Oregon be a signature win? And if you did that, that would catapult you into a different stratosphere as a team. But in order to get those things, you got to do things you've never done before. And that would be difficult to do, and have to have stuff go your way, especially against Oregon, to get a W.
Yeah, win one of these and you change this conversation, right? Like all of a sudden that college football playoff, like you can start thinking about that.
Well, here's the thing. I think there's going to be 4 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff. I think there's probably 4 to 5 teams in the SEC that get in. You obviously have an ACC team. You're going to have a Big 12 team, and you're going to have a group of 5 team. So that's how I think it's going to kind of shake out. I could be wrong. I think if Illinois is 10-2, I think they're in. because they have a loss to PSU and maybe a loss to Oregon. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We just beat Purdue by 1. But it's certainly in the realm of possibility. It's, do these close games go the way of Illinois or not? And here's the thing about close games. They will usually favor the team with the better quarterback because you have to make plays down the stretch to actually have a chance to win. And I got to give credit to Barry Lunny. I mean, this guy they've gotten better each year when it comes to quarterback play, I believe. Tommy was good. I thought Luke, maybe Luke and Tommy were right even. Luke had some growing pains. But, man, it seems like they've kind of come into their own this year. It's his first year with his second year in the quarterback. They got Justin Stepp. They got some of his guys in there as coaches as well. Barry Lunny brought in Justin Stepp at receivers and whatnot. And, man, I just feel like he's been creative. He's done what Brett's wanted him to do and still have the run game involved. He has the RPO game, and they've really developed players and developed Luke. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Barry Lunny, if they win 1 or 2 of these games, to get a contract extension and try to lock him up long term. Because what a lot of these guys do is they look at lower tier programs and says, what offensive coordinator is having success at a program that doesn't have all the resources that we have? Andy Kotelnicki, okay, Kansas. We saw it with 10 years ago with Tom Herman at Iowa State, was doing some crazy things. Urban Meyer never met the guy, just saw it off of film, but they were scoring points in the Big 12. Becomes the Ohio State coordinator and then becomes the head coach quickly after that at Houston and Texas. So people look at lower level teams, and if they're scoring, you score 50 points, I don't care who you're scoring 50 points. Again, you have a quarterback, Luke Altmyer, 14 touchdowns and 1 TD. You're doing something right as far as player development. And that's where I think Brett really has to focus in and say, how can we lock in Barry Lunny long term?
All right, Jay, I just want to ask you about the Oregon-Ohio State game. I know it's weird because, I mean, I get why there's so much pressure on Ryan Day, but they were so close at a tough place against a tough team, and I feel like they'll be back in the mix. But what a huge win for Dan Lanning and Oregon.
Sure, yeah. So everybody's saying, did Dan Lanning have 12 people on the field on purpose or not? Okay, I could say maybe, but did the 12th man really benefit them to stop a play to Jeremiah Smith or something? Maybe. Remember that, if they would have had a big play, that they could have had that play, and been in field goal range. Did it take a couple seconds off the clock? Yes. Did Will Howard lose track of his internal clock and not get down in time? Yeah, there were some chances that they had to win that game. But here's the thing. The Buckeyes are going to be back. They're going to be in the playoff. I don't see anybody beating them other than maybe Penn State. But if they lost to Penn State, they'd still be in because they're going to beat Michigan. So you're going to have Penn State, Oregon, and Ohio State probably in the playoff. The battle is really for that 4th spot. And that's why this Michigan game is really critical for Illinois on who gets that 4th spot. Iowa has a loss already to Iowa State, but looks like a really good loss because Iowa State's in the top 10 as well. So it's interesting how this could all shake out.
Speaking of playoff, huge game this week with Nebraska at Indiana. I think we're going to learn a lot about both those teams in this game.
I think it's going to be really interesting. Indiana, Kurt Cignetti, has won everywhere he's went, and I think it's super intriguing. They've had an easy schedule the first 6 games, and so it gets a little bit tougher, but it's not a brutal schedule if you look at it. Michigan was supposed to be their tough game. They could win 9 or 10 games. They certainly didn't have the non-con. I don't think they had a Power 5 non-con win, but because they played Charlotte and Florida International and Western Illinois. But hey, that's an interesting game too.
Well, J Leman, we'll break it all down defensively in the film room. But thanks as always for making us football smarter. We'll talk to you next week after a big game against Michigan.
Yeah, let me just say this before I break it down. I want to talk just the overtime success of Illinois football. You got to give credit to Brett Bielema. I mean, I believe he's 4-0 in overtime now at Illinois. Those are toss-up games. I give him credit for having a plan, being exceptional in the red zone with Barry Lunny. They've been because it's all red zone offense, condensed fields. And I give them credit for, on that defensive call, if you'll watch that last play, it's man-free coverage, meaning it's man-to-man other than there's one man free. We'll break this down in the field room. So if you're not a VIP member, become a VIP member so you can get one. Get this. But you saw Rosiak and Miles Scott have a 2-on-1 on the back. If the back goes to the defensive's right, the back's left, Rosiak would have him. That's why he went with him on the motion. Okay. If he goes back the other way, Miles Scott has him. And Dylan Rosiak is the free player. Now, they must have had the free player just trigger and blitz is what he did. But what was great about that is they didn't make Rosiak run all the way across the hump to get over that bunch formation. I don't think he ever would have got there. I think Miles Scott got enough. I think Ryan Brown could see enough that Miles Scott was going to get there that it made him hesitate to throw to Makabe because they never cleaned Miles Scott clean. And when that play, that rub route, which is a typical 2-point conversion play, is not there, there are not a ton of other options if you have somebody in your face because it's kind of a bang, one-option play, and there was coverage on everybody else, and then Rosiak pays it off with the sack. So I just want to talk about excellent execution in overtime. And to do that after everything that happened and to get that stop, hey, it means a lot. I'm not sure it's the greatest thing that could have happened, like Brett said, but it definitely shows progress. So that's a bonus 2 minutes for you. Let's go. We're 5-1. I want you to be encouraged. Like, subscribe, share, ring the bell for notifications. It really helps this channel out. Let's go.
I don't even have to say anything to end that. It was good preparation, though, right? That's a prepared team and a veteran team that's been in some moments.
You knew they had a plan. Okay, I will say this: Barry Lunny had a plan on how to get points on everything. They're doing this, let's do this. They're doing that, let's do this. What I didn't think is we had any kind of plan defensively. It was like this. I'm looking at my sheet and I'm like, okay, let's try this. Let's try. Like nothing was working, right? Like so that's where I was like, hey, we got to figure something out on the defense to get a stop when we need to stop. Some of that is personnel. Great defensive players erase mistakes. Right? It's why if a high school team has 2 great defensive players and 9 bums, they're good on defense because the safety and the linebacker can make all these plays. In college, it's no different. If you have 1 or 2 guys that can make erase mistakes, that's great. I thought Matthew Bailey could be that guy this year. It's been more Xavier Scott. Miles Scott sometimes the back end. We're still looking for that big disruptor up front that can disrupt stuff that makes everybody else better. Now you got me on a rant. We were going to close it down, but hey, that's what happens.
It's good stuff, though.
We need some more people to erase mistakes defensively because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get tricked. Offenses are going to scheme you up. Who can be that guy that can erase mistakes or throw off the timing or disrupt something so that we can actually get a 2nd and 10? We can get a tip ball that leads to a turnover. We can get the quarterback hit when he needs to be on the ground and then get tired of getting hit and get out the ball quicker and quicker. We didn't do that in the second half, and that's what we're going to have to do to win games against Michigan, to have a chance against Oregon, and to win games down the stretch in November. You're going to have to stop the run and run the ball, especially when the weather gets bad. Come on.
Off-season checklist that we got to do is go down the transfer needs because I think you just named them all right there on that defensive side of the ball. J Leman, you're the goods. We'll talk next week.
Peace.